Welcome back, everyone, to Spiritual Context for Worldly Chaos. This next interview is one of my favorites because it is with a very special person in my life. It is one of my best friends, Taylor Ursula. And in this episode, we talk about tarot, astrology, her new tarot deck, or at the time, her new tarot deck portals. And we have a great time weaving in and out of spiritual conversation. Taylor and I met in 2019, right before she moved back to Los Angeles. So she was living in New York at the time. We just clicked. We clicked on so many different levels, from our spiritual beliefs and pursuits to our personal lives. We have like this twinning thing going on all of the time. And she's just all around an awesome person, an awesome healer. And I learn so much from her every time we talk. I'm super excited for all of you to hear her too. If you'd like to go a little deeper into who she is, please make sure to check out the link in the description. You'll get taken to her website. She has her tarot deck up. She'll have Winding the Wheel, which is her new astrological journal that starts in the spring for spring equinox. And you'll hear a lot more about her present circumstances and life journey when we get to Saturday's episode, which is her follow-up interview. And now I will step aside and let 2023 me introduce Taylor Ursula. This week's guest is an incredible tarot reader, astrologer, and a close personal friend. Taylor and I met in 2019 and instantly bonded over magic. I'm so honored to have witnessed her creative process as she slowly and intentionally developed her dreamy and immersive tarot deck, Portals. I'm sure you'll all enjoy our conversation on how the deck was created and what this deck can do for your intuition. Please refer to the link in the bio section to view the deck as we dialogue. And now, on to the episode. Taylor Ursula merges traditional and modern astrology to explore the narratives at the forefront of your experience, using a combination of various mythologies and psychological theories to draw out the larger archetypal themes present in your reality. She creates individual and group containers for radical and ritualistic curiosity. Hello, Taylor Ursula. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Vanessa. I am very excited to be here.
I'm so excited you're here. I've known you now for, every time I think about how long have known you, it doesn't make any sense because I feel like I've known you way longer than I've known you. And I think that's just kind of like the star sister feeling or whatever. But it's so exciting to have you on for this particular reason, for Portals, and to talk about you as a tarot reader in general, because I had the amazing privilege to just be a back and forth with you sometimes for some of these cards. So I can't wait to dig back in and to hear all your thoughts away from going back and forth and thinking about things. Just like to hear your whole process and how you went through it. So my first question for you though is, what is your tarot journey? How did you get here? How did you get here with all of us?
My tarot journey, I love this question because my tarot journey is really the beginning of my magical journey in general. My tarot journey began really early. I remember my mom having the Aquarian tarot deck as a child, and I just was fascinated by it. I loved all of the images. I loved the colors. It just felt like such a lush world to me, and I was obsessed with understanding what these stories were about and what these stories were trying to tell me. I was very much a story child, very much a third house Pisces stellium, Saturn and Sag, very much give me stories, give me books, give me narratives. I want to be spoken to. I want to know what's happening. And so I would just sort of play around with them or hold them when I was younger. I had no idea what to do with them. And eventually I ended up with my own copy. And It was a very slow and beautiful and arduous journey, as it is for many people who are self-taught. There's so much that we take on in the beginning and we do not understand yet, and we agonize and we, don't want to
Preach.
see.
Preach.
We don't want to see certain things or obsess with certain cards or just like, wow, it had a very deep influence over me. And I think it was one of those things that I found challenging in a way that I made me hungrier to know it better. I would get very overwhelmed very easily. And, like I'm going to pull 5 Celtic crosses and like,
Oh my God, I've so been there.
and then I'm just going to completely like information overload myself. But it compelled me to really understand myself better. I had to acknowledge what it was pointing out to me, even as I tried to ignore it or, manipulate the message into something that I wanted to be hearing, And so it really is something that grew up with me, or I grew up with, or my understanding of it came about over many years before I was practicing with any people. And it was certainly my first experience with, I think, shadow work and with doing that really important inner knowing journey, So yeah, it was a long and winding road of self-discovery and narrative building ultimately, just really really falling in love with how many infinite strings of narratives can exist and how much potential we find in every pull that we have. So
I mean, every time I hear, one of your past stories, there's always been some kind of parallel between us. And I forgot your first deck, or the first one that you even handled, was the Aquarian deck. And that was the first one I ever handled. And it's always so cool to see how, this community just has so many parallels. Like, all of us can kind of find 6 degrees of separation in some sort of mystical direction. And yeah, it's just very cool. I started out more with, I think, tarot. You, I think when you matured a little more, went to the astrology route and then found your way back to tarot, or did you kind of go to both at the same time?
I think tarot was always happening. It's funny, this sounds like such a weird flex. I recently went back to the beginning of my Instagram, before anyone cared, before it was a mall, before we were all trying to sell something, really just those early days of what do I think about my life is interesting. And I'm really happy to see that there are so many tarot images from the very beginning. And so I think it's always been something that I've worked with, I think. And astrology had a similar hold on me, perhaps. And the study of it was much quicker. And maybe that's because of the different mediums or media of the languages, visual versus actual that language. And so, or more scientific language, I should say. And so I think they have been very different journeys in studying, and tarot has always been a backbone to kind of everything else that I've done.
I love that. I mean, that makes sense too, because, if you're interested in any of these things, you're probably interested in more than one. It's not just tarot. It's not just astrology. You might be into runes. You might be into the occult. You might be into theosophy. You might be there's so many different outlets for this. And especially since astrology and tarot have so much symbolism, that makes a lot of sense that both of them would be so important to you. We talk about how astrology is obviously cyclical. So it's a different language because it's a real-time language, or you can take snapshots and see how the planets and the houses and the zodiac are working with each other. But tarot is random, and you're just pulling it at random, and you got to trust that whatever's getting pulled is, the reflection of the situation. And it is the story that comes out that is, gives us that intuitive, imaginative, fantasy kind of experience where I think astrology can sometimes get into that a little bit more logical, right? Even though we go to mythology and things like that, but it can go a little left brain. Tarot you can be entirely right brain with tarot if you want to be. If you don't want to know any of the definitions, as long as you have a deck that really, the images really speak to you, then, you can fly. So let's talk about your images and portals, and let's talk about portals in general. So what was your idea behind portals? How many years ago did this pop into your head?
I love this. And I'm happy that I ended on the note that I did, because I think it fits in perfectly with what I was saying, which is that tarot is the backbone of kind of everything else that I do. And portals was something that was unlocked in my own subconscious for me as I was learning hypnosis, as I was studying hypnosis, and Jupiter was moving through Sagittarius in my 12th house. And so it felt like something that just started to kind of unravel. Before that, I had wanted to be actually, I'd wanted to be an artist. And I had been a writer in, I won't say a previous lifetime, because I am absolutely a writer still now. But I was doing a different kind of writer, and I was publishing as well, before I shifted into this line of work professionally. And so at that time, I thought of myself as a writer of words, but I did not think of myself as an artist by any means. And so it was something that I think I had felt very envious of others. I felt very, competitive and playing a lot of comparison games with other artists. And absolutely, I look back and I'm like, yes, you idiot. Like, you have always been an artist, clown.
No. Yes, you've always been an artist. Yes.
With compassion. I'm like, oh, baby, like, you are so hard on yourself. And it's so funny that you are so rigid in what you have defined artists to be. And yet you're over here doing all of these other things that are very artistic. And you are saying, no, that's not art. Okay.
No, and it's like, I'm sitting here thinking, like, that is art. Well, how is this not art?
Like, literally art. Like, it's literally, you're doing it. It's all how we define things for ourselves. So I think really studying hypnosis was something that allowed me, I think it unlocked a lot in me, which, of course, we're studying how to manipulate the subconscious mind. But I think something about going back and seeing past lives allowed some sort of creativity to emerge in a way that I had been kind of blocking it before. And so shortly after I finished my hypnosis studies, which was the fall of 2019, I just found myself sitting with like a little graphic design app. I think, it had popped up in the App Store, and I was like, okay, this is how I will make, other people use Canva and stuff. Like, I'm going to use Canva and stuff. And I just started kind of seeing my own interpretations of the cards. And I just started, I would be creating another image and I would see something, I'd be browsing and I would kind of be like, oh, that really feels like, and then I bet if we added, and it just sort of started to like unfold very organically and interestingly. And so I had a lot of fun kind of breaking out of this creative blockage that I had put myself in terms of whatever I was defining myself by. And I just started getting playful with images. I would be creating images for my social media page, and I would look back and think, this really has a like lover's vibe, or like this really has a Two of Cups theme, or like this feels kind of Four of Pentacles-y. And I would entertain that idea, and I would think, well, what yeah, what if that was a card, you know? What if that was a card? And like, what if you made another card? Um, I think I was in a little bit of denial of it for a while. And finally, it was kind of like, what if we just took this seriously and decided that this could be real? And that's how it
And the
started.
artist emerged. Because that is so true. It's like
Absolutely.
once you're in a flow, you're creating art, you know, and it is its own hypnosis. It is its own meditation. And when we are result oriented, that's that capitalistic perspective of things, then we actually don't get, it doesn't feel like art. So it makes sense if at times you didn't feel like you were creating because it was more based on a comparison or results, you know, like, oh, well, this person did this and it got them that. And then all of a sudden after this hypnosis and, you know, going back in your own past life regression is what you're talking about when you're talking about past lives, right? So yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah. So going through that
absolutely.
and flushing something out that's like, stop telling yourself you're not anything and
Yeah,
just explore, just look around.
absolutely.
You also wrote that you were like these cards, specifically these cards were have some sort of roots in sci-fi as well, or
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely. Um, so I think, I mentioned before that the timing of this was when Jupiter was moving through Sagittarius, and that is my 12th house, and where my Saturn is, and Ceres and Uranus, and they're all kind of in a sandwich. And so I think there's, I have three parents with very strong Sag planets and placements. We've got Venuses and Ceres and whatnot. And for me, that's all in my 12th house. And I think that's a big part of, I'll use the word potential again. It is the name of my business. So after all, so it makes sense. I feel like there's a lot of potential that was expected of me as a young person that I kind of internalized because I was not happy. And like, obviously, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of children will hide things away when they're not feeling safe or when their emotions aren't being tended to. But in particular, I was expected to like perform. Like I was expected to be this sort of like, my parents saw, oh, she loves telling stories and she loves writing books. Like I used to write a bunch of books when I was a kid. She loves learning songs and playing instruments. So let's figure out what her like talents are going to be and then like get her, just get those 10,000 hours in, like get her to genius status. And I was like, y'all are not it. Like, like what you're giving me is not worth this to me. I don't enjoy it. And you said, exploitation just now. You were talking about capitalism and like, absolutely, like y'all wanted me to be something, like y'all expected some sort of performance from me. And so I think for a long time, that part of me was locked away. I think I was protecting it because I felt like if I give you this, I'm not going to get what I need. And if we look at like a lot of child stars, that's like absolutely true. So
it's like the number one narrative that's coming out now is like,
happening.
all the things you think were awesome weren't
No,
really that awesome.
not good. Like,
A lot of predators around, and also this is the beginning of the results idea and the comparison idea, because you have to see something as being either better or worse than you so that you can gauge where you are. And then
yeah,
also seeing the result of something is like, oh, well, I'm not, producing a result.
right, right.
But so did you, with the sci-fi, did you like write about sci-fi? Did you watch a lot of sci-fi?
Right, I did. I watched a lot of sci-fi. I want to make a joke about how my mom, while she was pregnant with me, went to go see. I think it's Predator that came out in 1986. I'm trying to remember exactly, but like she loves sci-fi, and so like I grew up watching films that were far too complex for like for a child that age, but also like I mean I got it. Like I'm just again I'm a very narrative driven person, and so like seeing complex worlds, seeing these beautiful like they're highly structured, like very Capricorn, very like you know she loved all that stuff. Metropolis, like Geiger, all of those, Ray Bradbury, like met him at a restaurant once. We'll remember it forever because she was like so happy. So that was my surroundings. And my legal dad wanted to name me, was it Bucky, like for like Buckminster Fuller, like our Buckminster Fuller, like, or Cosmo. So that was just gonna be, that was just there. Like that was what I was born into. that was
God, I
that was
love
the
it.
atmosphere of my youth was sci-fi. My mom is a huge sci-fi nerd. She's also a writer. So that was my household. That was what I grew up on. I grew up on these very like, oh, my legal dad's also a psychiatrist. So symbolism everywhere. Would sit up with me at night when I had nightmares and explain to me the symbolism of what I was dreaming about to help me rationalize it and understand why it was happening. So I grew up in a house, in like houses of symbols. I grew up in houses of mythology. I grew up in a sci-fi home. I was like exposed to sci-fi in the womb. And so that I think is a lot of how I like a lot of the world building that I do, especially through hypnosis. I really love to just imagine what we can create within ourselves. And so I think the cards are one translation of that process. I think if I made this deck again, I would make an entirely different deck.
I feel like that's what people say when they birth something. It's like you birth something, you're like, oh, this is amazing. But if I could do it again, not, even replace this one by any means, but like if I had the energy and the flow to do this again, a whole new idea would come out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode, and I hope to see you at the next one. And as always, as above, so below, blessed be.